So, today we're going to tackle a story you probably think you know inside and out, the Garden of Eden. But what if there's way more to it than just a garden? What if it was actually a kingdom? We're about to dive into a really fascinating interpretation from the book The Lamb, the Cross, and the Water that might just change how you see this whole story. All right, so let's just jump right in with the big question. What if the story of Eden isn't really about a man, a woman, and a piece of fruit? What if it's something grander? A story about a king, his kingdom, and a cosmic battle for control that started long before them.
Now, this verse from Ezekiel is a real key to unlocking this whole idea. And get this, it's not talking about Adam. The source argues this is a reference to Satan before his fall. What that implies is that Eden was a spiritual realm that existed long before humans ever showed up, with its own history and its own ruler that predates Adam.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll reimagine Eden as a spiritual kingdom. Then, we'll dig into Adam's real job, not just gardener, but gatekeeper. We'll look at his first royal assignments, understand the incredible purpose behind the creation of woman, and wrap up with the very first divine covenant, marriage. First up, let's talk about the setting itself. So I want you to just, for a second, forget that simple picture book image of a lush garden. We need to reframe Eden as a spiritual headquarters, a sacred space where the barrier between heaven and earth was incredibly thin. Now, here is a detail that's absolutely crucial to this whole perspective. Adam wasn't created in the garden. The text says he was formed outside and then placed into it. That's a huge distinction. It means Eden wasn't just his home. It was his assignment. It was a divine training ground where Adam was supposed to learn how to rule and expand heaven's influence over the rest of the planet. Okay, so if we're looking at Eden as a kingdom, that completely changes Adam's job description, right? He wasn't just there to water the plants. His mission was way bigger. Stewardship, sure, but also cultivation and, most importantly, protection. The Bible gives a pretty simple instruction. Adam was to dress it and to keep it. Now, dressing it or cultivating it makes perfect sense. But that second part, to keep it, that's where this whole interpretation hinges. See, the original Hebrew word used here is shamar, and it doesn't just mean to maintain or tidy up. It means to guard, to protect, to hedge about from intruders. And that begs the question, right? Guarding from what? Well, from an intruder. And who was that intruder? Satan, the one who had already been cast out of this very domain and was trying to get back in. I mean, this just flips the whole script, doesn't it? Adam wasn't supposed to be a passive gardener just enjoying the view. He was an active gatekeeper, a spiritual watchman whose job was to wield authority and protect this sacred space. He was meant to cultivate with one hand and stand guard with the other. All right, so with Adam installed as the new king of this domain, he was given some very specific tasks. And these weren't just random chores. They were more like royal assignments designed to test his wisdom, his discernment, and his readiness to actually rule. You know those two famous trees? They weren't just, well, trees. They were living symbols, like spiritual signposts. The tree of life constantly pointed him upward, reminding him of his connection to God. But the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that was a big red flag, a constant warning about the enemy's agenda. It was a loyalty test, right in the middle of his kingdom. And then you have this task of naming the animals. Now, this wasn't just Adam getting creative. The source suggests that God had already assigned their nature and names in the spirit. Adam's job was to basically tune in to God's frequency and speak out the names that were already there. It was a test to see if his mind was aligned with God's. And think about what this one task actually accomplished. It's huge, really. First off, when you name something, you're exercising authority over it. Simple as that. Second, he was proving to God that he had that divine intelligence and discernment. And third, and this is so important, by seeing every creature come before him in a pair, he had a profound realization. He was utterly alone. And that realization set the stage for the next great act of creation. And that feeling that he was alone leads us right into the creation of woman. Now, she wasn't some kind of afterthought or a quick fix for Adam's loneliness. In this view, her creation was the grand finale, the finishing touch on God's masterpiece, specifically designed to solve a problem that God himself pointed out. This is a massive moment. For the very first time in the whole creation story, God says something is not good. Not a flaw in his work, but a state of being. Loneliness. And this wasn't just an emotional issue for Adam. It had some serious spiritual consequences. So why was this loneliness so not good? The source actually breaks it down into 5 key reasons. It narrows your vision, makes you self-centered, secretive, and causes deep emotional stress. It's almost like the origin story for that classic male stoicism, that tendency to just internalize everything and walk alone.
So, to solve this not good problem, God creates woman. And notice she's not made from the dust, like Adam. She's taken from his side, a more refined creation. And the source really zeroes in on the term womb man, highlighting this incredible, unique power to partner directly with God in the sacred act of bringing forth new life.
But her purpose was so much deeper than just procreation. Think about it. Adam was in a deep sleep when she was made. It's a beautiful picture of her ongoing spiritual purpose, to wake man up when he's spiritually dozing off, to be the one who really ushers God's presence into the heart of the home. She was the answer to his solitude and the key to his spiritual energy.
And where does all of this lead? It builds up to the very first divine institution, the first covenant that God makes with humanity. And that covenant is marriage, described here as a sacred threefold cord, with God woven right into the center. This verse right here, this is basically the divine blueprint for marriage. It's not just a nice suggestion. It lays out 3 powerful commands that are meant to be the very foundation for building a new kingdom, a new family on earth. It's a really clear 3-step process. First, you have to leave your old family to create your own independent unit. Second, you cleave, which means you are glued to your wife, making that the most important human bond in your life. And finally, you become one, totally inseparable, in body and purpose and spirit, ready to build a legacy together. So, all of this leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on. If Eden was a spiritual kingdom, if Adam was its first king and marriage was its founding covenant, what does that mean for you and me? What purpose, what authority, and what kind of kingdom are we supposed to be building and guarding in our own lives today? Look, if this breakdown got you thinking and you want to dive deeper, the full argument is right there in the book. It's a seriously thought-provoking read, and I highly recommend checking it out. You can find it on Amazon.com.